The season of the Vampire Lestat has concluded, and I'm a bit sad. I am also left a bit unsatisfied with the conclusion of the season. So let's get into it. This is episode 7 of the Vampire Lestat, the finale. The Failures is called. But I did like how they explained how they survived. Lestat and Louis, how they put their heads back on top of their bodies. They connected. We start off pretty much where we left off last time on that cliffhanger. Even get a point of view shot of Lestat falling down from his body. That's an interesting sickle there. That I think is that Daniel. I think that might be Daniel. And then, so we get this fun dream sequence. So this is pretty cool. I generally do like dream sequences when they're done well. And I think this is a pretty good dream sequence. It's pretty much a sort of trial, intervention, therapy session for Lestat here with all his fledglings, pretty much, right? And also, I guess his maker, going over his own failures and his insecurities, and about his whole life there as he's fading away into death, while Louis here is having a reuniting with Armand here, because remember, Armand has been going around doing an apology tour, with Lestat, with Daniel. And it's finally Louis' turn while his body is disconnected from his head. So this is really cool, effective, horrific execution here of the reuniting of exes here. Fitting for this vampire show. Like, I feel like it's well done. Like, we haven't really seen something like this quite before. The disembodied head talking with the evil mastermind here. Pretty much, it's kind of established now that Armand is the grand evil vampire mastermind. He was kind of like that in the first couple seasons, but to a little lesser extent. There was a little bit of wiggle room here, but now we're pretty much completely affirming that, yeah, he is the top mastermind here, because as he expressed in previous episodes, he's been manipulating Daniel's life and intervening, and he's been doing similarly with Louis too. In fact, when Claudia comes around, Regina, the fraudia, he kind of he confirms that he's the one who's responsible for introducing Regina to Louis' life, to kind of get back at Louis that way by using this woman here who looks like Claudia, because he used facial recognition technology. It's like all high tech stuff, but it makes sense. That's how, I guess that's how it makes sense. How he found someone that looks like her. To build up to this moment, really, where he tries to get an apology from Louis. He's like, he apologized to Louis for the whole Paris thing, but he expects an apology to him because, he expected to have a fulfilling love life with Louis, and it went to shit. He went back to Lestat, pretty much. And so that's what he has this hole in his heart, that's his excuse, really. We'll get into it in a little bit. But yeah, I guess let's go through kind of like Armand first, and then we'll talk about Lestat's scenario. But yeah, that's how he got Regina involved. And again, pretty evil stuff here, using the innocent Regina for his purposes. And he's an interesting character, Armand, because, like, I've had a soft spot for Armand because, he's Armand, and but, like, he's probably the most evil character of all the vampires we've seen, it seems, almost just to the extent that the way he lacks so much empathy pretty much from all the other vampires. And like his motivation, like it kind of makes sense, because he's just he's probably one of the older vampires. I think he is probably the oldest vampire in the show that we know of, besides Akasha, and I guess maybe Magnus, who's not around, or Marius. But like he's been tortured for so long, and he always felt a little bit sociopathic, but a little bit detached, but like almost like you weren't quite sure, but then this kind of like demonstrates it more. But I guess the main thing that this episode kind of reveals is that Armand has been looking for somebody to love and to care for him, because it's kind of like the narrative of that he's had an abusive childhood, so in a way it's kind of could be read a little bit, maybe a bit offensively, the fact that like, oh, if you have an abusive child, could you become monstrous or something. So I could see how that could be taken not so well for some viewers. But the idea is here in this moment here where Louis finally, says that like, hey, like we never really talked about your past, Armand, how you were abused and sold into, slavery and sex slavery. Because he did mention that, Armand, when he was looking at the painting, last season. And so he never really processed that. And it seems like this whole spat he's had with Louis this whole time is kind of like trying to fill in that trauma void and find somebody that can cradle him, like he says, like Louis says. And that's what actually breaks him. That's what actually gets him to like accept the apology from Louis in a way, even though Louis kind of like doesn't want to really apologize and is like saying fuck you all the time. And interestingly enough, the way he wants the apology is similar, is by writing it down, through by telling him to write it down, what we're using his body and stuff. That was also an interesting thing I haven't quite seen before. But in the way that they survive, I guess Armand acknowledges that like Louis is, because he's a fledgling of Lestat, who has the blood of Akasha, that's allowed him to survive. And also in the previously on, we do get a little glimpses, little clues, references from earlier on of Farid saying that like, hey, like just because your head's cut off doesn't really mean that you're not necessarily gonna die. As a vampire, there's still a possible way to cure to resuscitate a beheaded vampire. I guess if you do it quick enough. And that's, of course, Farid is here. He's been working for Armand this whole time as well, along with Daniel. They're on the Daniel Armand team, or on Team Armand. And he's like, basically Armand also is like says that like Farid is very much interested in the science of it. Farid is very much interested in what makes vampires tick and how vampires work. And so that's what he's getting out of this. He's getting like research and stuff. But I feel like there's also maybe some kind of threat involved too, perhaps. Like, what other reason does Farid have? Is it just because he's just very interested in learning more about the science of vampires and how they work? Maybe that's probably the main thing. But he's there monitoring, making sure Louis doesn't completely fade away. But yeah, this is a gruesome, or torture sociopathic way of getting an apology and like kind of like getting some closure in your relationship, your ex's love affair here. love situation here. And also, again, he even like coldly, commands another one of his thralls pretty much to kill himself in front of Louis. We'll get to this scene in a second. And there's Farid back in research where he thrives, studying, analyzing us. So a lot of exposition here, but I think it works well here. I think that the visuals are nice here. We definitely feel like we're in Louis' head here. So this episode goes a long way to really like explain Armand's character here. So it's like at this point, either you accept that his motivation was because he's a jilted lover, and he has this black hole of trauma from his childhood that he needs to fill and overcome. And so, is that enough? Is he gonna is this enough for Armand? Is he gonna be able to move forward now? He does mark him, like you would suspect that's gonna heal, It's not like Lestat's scars that happened before he turned to a vampire. So then he kind of leaves. It's also kind of like, again, showing how he leaves Louis here somewhat uncaringly, satisfied with what he has, assuming that he's going to survive, because he's going to leave it up to Farid to Dr. Farid to sew him back up, I guess. But it's even what Farid, how he words it here, kind of he's almost like wording it like, oh, I'm not like an expert, or I don't know everything about this. I could maybe this won't work. Almost like he's not super confident, but he's just saying I'm gonna do. Is gonna do much other than hold the head in place. But Armand doesn't seem too bothered. He's like, yeah, it'll work out. He's like, I'm not a plastic surgeon, he says. Not for the expertise. And as you see later, it does leave like a scar around his neck. But of course, you would suspect that it will heal. And they'll be back to normal eventually. But yeah, that's a traumatic episode. And that's that for Armand. So basically, he became pretty much the behind the scenes villain of the season, which we suspected maybe it was going to be more Gabriella, and that's more so for Lestat. So I guess Armand is Louis' main villain, and then of course it kind of ties in together the whole Claudia situation too. I felt a little iffy about the introduction of Regina, but I guess this and then the seance scene kind of just, helps a little bit more with the closure of the whole story arc with Claudia, with Louis, with her bond here. That I guess we really needed to for some closure from last season. Again, I feel like Claudia still needs a little bit more work, perhaps another seance scene or something with her and Madeline or something to really conclude her story arc, which we might see at some point. But that was the whole scenario with Louis. Back to Lestat, though, back to the sort of intervention here. And of course, this is all like in his mind, but it's kind of echoing pretty much what has been teased throughout the season, right? Of him seeing his muses, his fledglings, his murderers, in the crowd of his concerts, different situations like that. And it's all like coming into fruition here where they like recite his failures and how he's not really deserving of Akasha's blood, and it's in a way, it's kind of like a trial, a sort of trial for Lestat in the way that, Louis was put on trial last season. And then we get some fun, surreal moments, of course, because his head, of course, is in the bowling bag for Daniel, has his little vengeance kick here, feeling disrespected by Lestat during the whole interview sequence that he faked all those episodes ago. And that's pretty much his motivation here, just to like get the last laugh on Lestat. And so he appeared. That's a fun little surreal moment of him appearing in the ceiling at some point here. That's really fun. And also we get I guess a confirmation too that like because TC is here, that that Lestat sired TC. Because at the end of that one episode, the bandmates wanted to be vampires, and we didn't quite see who made who. We later found out that Gabriella made Alex, and then now we know TC was made by Lestat, and so that we would now assume that Daniel. Wait, was Daniel there at the? No, Daniel wasn't there. It was the Barkley, the vampire DJ, Sam Barkley, was at the studio, so he must have made Salamander. So that's Salamanders. That's a character I feel like we need a little more of this season. Maybe we'll get more of next season. The relationship between Salamander and Barkley could be interesting. But yeah, fun sequence here at the dinner table. And so yeah, it's pretty much at the end here. It's a sort of like a recap of like Lestat's life here. This kind of feels like a sort of recap of all this, the whole seasons. It feels a little bit like series finale like, but not quite. And so yeah, so then this whole time this alarm is ticking, right? And it feels like the ticking time bomb here, like to the point really of like, is he gonna fade away and die? Of course we don't suspect that, because we know that he had the recording of the failures that he auctioned, and he's been narrating this whole time. But there's still some tension there. More so the timer here, to me, in my mind, was like, damn, like it's getting closer and closer to the end of the freaking episode, and we're still in this dream sequence, because I felt like, damn, I wanted to see the concert, and maybe there'll be a concert here within the dream or something. And there was a little bit of that. But yeah, basically he comes up, he's like, well, thanks for your little intervention here, but I'm the main attraction, and he starts to defend himself, like, hey, actually I'm actually pretty cool, like I'm actually pretty great, and his whole point here is that, like, even though I failed a bunch, at least I tried, and that's more than any of you did, pretty much, or better than what you did. So in a way, it's a decent defense justification. Like, part of learning and growing is failing a lot, and learning from your mistakes, so it's a sort of like a little bit of a redemption arc for Lestat here. They did focus on this guy. Like, I don't think we saw him before. I think he says, I killed you in 53. I feel like, am I forgetting him? It feels a little odd. Like, he feels like maybe he could be an important, like, book character or something that I'm not aware of. But this whole sequence here is him. He says that, you're here because I killed you, or I traumatized you, or I made you, so of course it's all in his head, it's sort of, his own like dream sequence. They say that, like, that before you die, like as you're dying, your brain starts fading away, right? And then you go into a sort of dream sequence scenario in your own mind. You start kind of going and start dreaming your last final dream. And that's kind of like what they say, that your life flashes before your eyes before you die. Like, perhaps before we die, we all have a one last dream that's like a mix of all our past, and then we just mix it up in our brain and have a nice dream like this. So this is kind of like make me think of that. It's kind of what he's doing here. But because it's a supernatural vampire show, witchy show as well, like, could this be a sort of limbo space where spirits are able, souls the big thing in this season 2, in this episode particularly, are able to communicate with Lestat here? Are these the souls of his victims, you know? The most important surprise here, also, he does reveal that the black licorice isn't about Louis' penis, it's about this person he killed. I wrote a song about you. I guess like black licorice. Is this person a DJ or something? They have headphones. Is that their stage name? I don't know. But they are not impressed. They're like, your time, the clock is ticking. And okay, so yeah, so he starts to fade here, and he's starting to think about Louis, and it does seem like even Louis acknowledges to Armand on his head on the table at the butcher shop as well, that they seem to be their true love. You know, Louis and Lestat seem to be the you know, they're soulmates almost, it feels like, right? Maybe that's what it seems like. And then, but the big thing here is when Paul shows up. Paul, remember, is Louis' brother who fell off the roof. Suicide, perhaps? It appeared that way. But Louis suspected, I think he acknowledged, that he asked Lestat if it was Lestat's doing. Like, did you like get into Paul's head and cause him to jump, you know, because you wanted to torture me and bring me to the dark side and make me a vampire, and have me be your lover and trauma dump all that on you and kind of take advantage of Louis' vulnerability to make him a vampire and stuff like that. Like, was that a manipulation tactic on Lestat? And that's been a theory from book readers, you know, that I think Anne Rice said it wasn't true or something. But this kind of lends to that theory that, oh, like, if this is the place where the souls of the people are here, the people that Lestat killed, does that mean that Lestat actually was responsible for Paul's death? You know, is that what this is saying? But also remember, it said he said, if you're here, either I killed you or I traumatized you. He says, memorably traumatized you, or I made you. And so he didn't make Paul. If we're to believe that he wasn't responsible, and believe Lestat when he told Louis that he wasn't responsible for Paul's death, then his presence here is because he traumatized him. You know, obviously he in season 1, you know, Paul was suspicious of Lestat, feeling like he was the devil, and he definitely, you know, while he was seeing Louis at the very beginning, he probably, like, you know, felt like, oh, he's like a bad boyfriend type of character. Of course, you know, at that point Louis hadn't come out yet, but there was still that vibe. And he even says here, like, I wish you were a woman, and Lestat even says, like, oh, like, sometimes too, which is nice, like, kind of indicates some sort of, you know, gender fluidity with Lestat. And then, but the thing is that, you know, that's experiencing Paul experiencing his brother Louis being lost to a devil-like figure. You know, it could be considered traumatizing. But also, there was a scene in the dinner table where Lestat kind of like talks back at Paul for being a bit rude, and he even says, he pretty much talks about how he forsaken God. You know, he left God because he was interested in being a priest at some point, which we see a little bit in the flashbacks with that one monk trying to, you know, teaching little Lestat about stuff. So he lost his faith in God and stuff, and so that whole sequence, you know, could be seen as very traumatizing for Paul. So the point is basically, like, this doesn't really necessarily mean that Lestat was involved and responsible for Paul's death. It could just mean that, you know, he traumatized him, and that's why he's here. He was within the sphere of Lestat's historical life. And also, it's a dream sequence. It's like a fading death, life flashing before your eyes on the brink of death sequence. So it doesn't really have any fixed rules. So it could just be, the moment here, a moment for Lestat to kind of realize that, hey, like Louis does love me, situation that he's playing in his mind, and he uses Paul. He imagines Paul in the scenario to give this message to him, because Paul pretty much says like, hey, like Louis does love you. Just it's hard for him to say it, and that's like the light at the end of the tunnel there before he wakes up, because it's time to get on stage. So what we've gathered here is that I think we saw at the bowling alley here that Raglan James shows up at the bowling alley, the Talamasca, because the big info dump here is that they want, again, the Great Conversion to happen. There was a little bit of back and forth here, right? Like, wait, what did the Talamasca really want? It seems like they were anti-Great Conversion, but they're actually pro-Great Conversion. They wanted Louis to kill what's his face, Bruce, and the gang, because I feel like that kind of indicated that they want to diminish the vampire population. But in fact, I think it's more so like they just felt maybe the faction of Bruce was like troublesome for their motives of doing this Great Conversion. Maybe they would get in the way somehow because they were a powerful faction or something. There's probably more to it to that, but in reality, they want the Great Conversion to happen, and this is something that is built on the Talamasca show, which has been canceled, which I mentioned before, where in that show at the very end it was kind of revealed that they were making more vampires. They were like kind of taking vampires that were judged for death because they broke some kind of vampire law, and vampires were after them to kill them. So they were like, hey, like, either you can go get killed by those vampires, or you can do us a favor and we'll protect you or something. And so the favor was to create more vampires. So, and that, of course, that show got canceled, but it kind of leads to this. Like, why do they want more vampires? Because they want to actually continue the Great Conversion, because I guess they feel that is the way to save the planet, because there's overpopulation or something. They want to thin down the herd of humans or something. It's a very utilitarian way of thinking that is not really well supported by environmentalists, but that, because there's, we just have, in reality, capitalism and all that is leading to environmental issues, the super expansion of fossil fuels, all that, and data centers using so much energy, all this stuff, fracking, like there's farming, like cattle farming, all this stuff. Like, we can diminish that. We can strive for a better world, and that would be a more effective way to save the world from environmental collapse. But it seems that, I guess, the Talamasca, feels that like it's impossible or something. Like, they feel like at this point, the powers that be, the big corporations aren't going to change, and maybe they feel like their best bet is to just eliminate a big part of the population on Earth, because they don't want to put their resources into any sort of political revolution or something. They rather just do the Thanos thing and get rid of people in mass genocide and massacres, I guess, via the vampire conversion. I think that's what Raglan here is concluding here. I feel like that's the reason why he wants the Great Conversion. Let me know if there's another interpretation here. So that's why he wants Lestat's head back, because they've been planning for this whole time, and so they're the ones that put Lestat's head back on his body. It does end with this little moment here of Daniel showing his fangs, like almost indicating that, oh no, is this gonna be a fight scene? Like, is he gonna, is he gonna be mad? Like, I guess that like he convinces Daniel off screen, like, hey, this is better for the world. You can get your revenge on Lestat later or something. I don't know. It feels like they didn't really have the time or knowledge or desire or the right words or script to really conclude this little arc here between Daniel and Raglan. Like, maybe we'll get to it later, but kind of want to know what happened after that. Like, what really convinced Daniel to like let Raglan walk away, because Raglan's just a human, while Daniel is the vampire. Of course, Raglan has Alex on his side. That's another little bit of reveal there, that Alex is kind of seems to be working for the Talamasca. Maybe he sides more with Talamasca than with Armand, it would appear. So, and what is his motivation more so? Does he want to save the planet? Is he kind of, we suspected that it was he was mostly out there to avenge his brother's death, but I'm thinking that Lestat was responsible, not Armand. But I feel like Talamasca might even have told Alex that, hey, no, it was actually Armand. And so maybe he's being a double agent now, Alex. And it's like, okay, now I'm going to work for Talamasca and take out Armand. I don't know. That could be something that's building up here. But again, I feel like this season feels like it kind of skimmed over Alex's character arc here a little bit too quickly. So that's kind of what happened there. Interesting. And then, of course, we go back to the bus, and at this point I was like, okay, good, maybe we'll see the concert, because I wanted to kind of see the concert, at least a little peek of the concert, and this is where the Scott gets explained everything that happened. They jumpstart him again pretty much here. He wakes up with his head already there, and a nice sweet moment is here when he's like, actually, where is freaking Louis? And so Louis here at the bus too. Nice little little like reunion here. Feeling the scars there. So I think we're finally coming to the point now where Louis and Lestat are kind of like gonna get back together. It seems, right? Everything seems good, and even Lestat's like, I should quit right now. I should have quit right then. Shouldn't have I? That's what he wanted to do. It ends kind of like with him like saying like, no, I don't want to go back on stage. Of course, Gabriella. Perhaps maybe Gabriella's working with the Talamasca too, because it kind of suggests that Gabriella was kind of responsible for saving Lestat as well. Last time I suspected that maybe Gabriella was lurking in the woods, lurking in the park, to save Lestat, but it was Talamasca agents. But maybe, with the help of Gabriella, they were there. I don't know. That could be something. But of course, Gabriella wants the great conversion as well. She kind of wants to rule, or at least, want vampires to rule. And then Lestat even mentioned, he says that Raglan introduces himself, and he says that he and Raglan become friends, so that's a little sneak peek into the future there. Looks like Raglan and Lestat are going to become friendly, or are now. And then we do a little peek at Axe again, saying that he kept the role of Axe, his role, vague. Again, I suspect he's working for Talamasca to maybe get back Armand as a double spy, or maybe we'll see. These fun guys are still having fun. And then, so of course Gabriella's trying to convince Lestat to go on stage, because like there's all these people here. You can't disappoint them. We got to do this great conversion. The resolution between Lestat and Gabriella here isn't quite resolved. I think they're saving that for next season, which I assume they will. You know, it is, the whole incest thing is a little iffy, and I felt like maybe they were going to get more into the grooming aspect, the potential abuse between his mother and him, and they do hint at that throughout here. It seems like a sort of abusive scene here with her showing him the death of these witches here, that aren't witches, of course, to teach him, almost to kind of persuade him to leave the area, leave the town, basically. Hey, become something better. I guess in a way, we get the sense, maybe this comes more across in the book, which I haven't finished yet, that I feel like she almost at this point in their life, like she sees Lestat as a sort of like an extension of herself, and maybe she wants to live vicariously through him. And so her motivation here really is to like get him to see like the horrors of this town and this place, and that you should get out of here, and like, and this is why you have to go leave and start a better life and live a better life. I can't, because I'm stuck in this marriage or whatever, and a woman in this time period, but you can, and you can leave. And so that's what she wants to do, and she feels disappointed that he stays at home even until he's 30, she says. But this is pretty like harsh thing to do, and to also like also a little bit sociopathic to force your child to watch people burn, the little girls burn even, and of course that traumatized Lestat. Excuse me. And so this moment's kind of wrapping. Supposedly kind of wrapping up the story arc between them two in this season, but I still think there's a lot left on the table there, and so we're not really gonna conclude it in this season, and it'll probably be next season where we'll see more of the fallout between Lestat and his mother. But he does mention that he still loves her in this sequence here, even if he says it's grotesque. Even though if you might think it's grotesque, he says, "I still love you." But I think he's definitely focusing on Louis at the end there. He's the top one that he loves. So then that's that, and then we cut to him recording. So we've been hearing him record these the Failures album tier tape recording memoir of his life, pretty much, and or at least of this time period in his life, the tour. And so there's a flash forward, but not quite super flash forward, because it's not flashing forward past where we saw the beginning of the season. This is like before that. So this is after we assume the concert, right? We assume that he does the concert, and then there's a big conversion vampire scenario that leads to the end of the world, or a big cataclysmic world ending situation. That's not quite world ending, but maybe a large population dies, as they reference in the first episode of the season, where a large Y chromosome population died. So that's kind of alluding to Akasha's plan. From my understanding, is that Akasha wants to get rid of a lot of the male population, if not all the male population, and start anew in the vampire world. And so he in the recordings at the beginning of the tapes, he says that it wasn't entirely his fault, and he was just there, and like maybe he had a part in it, but it wasn't completely his fault. Now he's admitting that actually it's all my fault, and so that's kind of like, again, part of the Failures theme of the season, and part of his story arc, that he's kind of acknowledging his mistakes and acknowledging his failures. And it's like, okay, he's come to terms like, yeah, okay, so it was actually my fault. He said it was all his fault. But maybe is he giving himself too much credit here? We're gonna have to see, in future seasons if that's true. This episode was sort of a therapy session for him, kind of like, being confronted with his failures and then saying like, hey, it's not that bad. I'm not that bad. By the end there, I'm actually pretty good, pretty great, a little bit reluctantly saying so, and then at the end, he's like, okay, now he's completely depressed here. It's like, and self-deprecating, like it's actually all my fault. So it's a little, back and forth there with this episode. But of course, it is far ahead after the concert. So the disappointing here and why I feel unsatisfied with this ending, of course, is just it feels like they ended it a little bit too early. Perhaps you may say an episode too early. This could have been a good penultimate episode. We were, we were all expecting perhaps the concert scene, one final concert scene, for the finale, and perhaps something that would give us a hint to why Louis and Armand were seen as injured and missing like an eye, missing a leg. Like we saw that at the very beginning of the season. Like what we want. It's like the season was building up to that, so it's like it felt like we needed something to connect that to it, some scene to connect that to the beginning. And so to not do that feels like a little bit of disservice, especially when we have to wait a couple years for the next season, and that's one of the failures in general, I think, of certain TV shows, some TV seasons of shows where they leave you an unsatisfying cliffhanger situation, where you have to wait so long, unlike in between episodes, right, where you can wait for a week, or maybe previous eras in TV where you only have to wait like a year or so, for the next season. And so it feels like it's not really as coherent as a story for a season as maybe as what I would have liked, and maybe a lot of fans would liked. And also, like, it feels like, I think for me, like, I think that like seasons of TV, like each season, I feel like needs to like have a good conclusion that wraps up the season's themes, which I think in general this season did do, but it should also wrap up, for the most part, the plot that has been teased at, particularly like in the first episode. It should kind of like come full circle a little bit. It could still have like a sort of tease for the next big conflict that will happen in the next season, but I feel like it feels a little bit like a disservice to not really complete the story beats that were set up in the opening of the season. And it feels like they ran out of track, like oops, we planned to maybe do it, but we ran out of budget, or we ran out of, that they didn't manage their time well, or something happened where they couldn't do it. So that some TV shows have had that unfortunately happened to them at the end of the season, and this is one of those, because I feel like even previous seasons of the show, Interview with the Vampire, it wasn't quite, the cliffhanger wasn't quite like that, and it was satisfying. Even like season 1 that ended, as part 1 of part 2 of Interview with the Vampire, like even season 1, I thought that was a good cliffhanger because it pretty much wrapped up, the beginnings of Louis' story. It's a good stopping moment because he was going to go to Europe. We got Lestat was supposedly dead, and Claudia and Louis were escaping. Like that was a good stopping moment that felt complete, like a complete story, a complete chapter or chapters, of a novel there. But then also teasing us with what's to come with the ending of Armand and Lestat. Armand and Louis saying that, love of my life and all that. That was a good little tease to the future, but it still felt like a satisfying conclusion to the season, you know. And then of course season 2 was satisfying because that was the end of the book of Interview with the Vampire. And then, but then this feels like not quite like that, you know, mostly because of that opening in episode 1. Like maybe if it had started the season with, you know, him with Lestat sitting down and recording a scene similar to this, you know, but him just recording and not even have the auction scenario. It's like behind the scenes stuff, like a scene of him just recording, maybe just this tape running, you know, and you can still have the framing device of him, you know, narrating, you know, the tour dates and all that. And then that would have felt more satisfying. Even have an interesting cliffhanger situation here with the city that's like this decimated here. But because we had that little tease of Louis and Armand at the auction, Raglan James was there as well. Like that just kind of like, you know, threw things off and kind of built up something that wasn't delivered by the end. So now we have to wait a couple years, and I don't even think they confirmed the next season 4. But I'm pretty sure it's gonna happen. I mean, this is, I think, their most successful of their new shows, AMC. The ratings, of course, haven't been as good as the first season, but that's just typical for TV shows. You know, the ratings go down, you know, as seasons continue. I'm wondering if the renaming of the series to the Vampire Lestat helped or hindered. I don't know if it did much of a difference. It seems, because of the ratings I saw, it's pretty similar or even less than last season, depending on the episode. But maybe if they do season 4, they name it The Queen of the Damned, which will be named after the book, which comes after the Vampire Lestat, and it's pretty much ending, I believe, close to the end of Vampire Lestat. And the Queen of the Damned, of course, is when Akasha shows up in the modern timeline here. And so, you know, if they do it maybe the marketing of Queen of the Damned might be more alluring to new viewers. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But if the renaming of the season of focusing on Lestat didn't attract new viewers, then maybe the Queen of the Damned won't either. I don't know, but maybe the Queen of the Damned has more attraction to viewers because people might remember the movie or something. We'll see. But yeah, like I feel like that what they would I guess maybe I shouldn't have built my hopes up for like the concert at the end. Like that's a big sequence in the Queen of the Damned story. So like I think the concert is at the end of the book, and then that directly leads to the Queen of the Damned. The next, you know, that scene continues, and then, you know, it's almost like a cliffhanger for the Queen of the Damned. So I suspected that's what they would be doing. But like having, you know, so it's like even not showing the whole concert thing, and like just having like the ending being maybe the beginning of the concert, and then have a cliffhanger, you know, wrapping up the themes of the season, and then kind of giving us a clue of like why, you know, tying it back to the opening of like, okay, at the concert there's some carnage or something, and that's gives us an idea of like, oh, that's why Louis and Armand are injured in the opening, you know. Like that would have felt more satisfying. Maybe not even show the whole sequence of the concert, you know, and then continuing and next season from there, you know, maybe similar to the book. Like maybe that would have felt more satisfying. I don't know. So, but yeah, that's just kind of generally my feelings on this particular ending here. But overall, like I think the conclusion of the Armand situation and Louis thing, I think was well done. I think the horror element of the head him talking to Armand talking to Louis's head and kind of trying to torture him to get an apology and all that. I think that was really very well done here. I did enjoy this the whole element of that. The dream sequence was fun with Lestat. Even it's fun to see these characters back, like the opera singer that he killed. Then of course this sequence is funny. So pretty much most of it I really did enjoy. It was just that the ending felt a little bit lacking there. Felt like a little bit disjointed from the rest of the season, or not really completing the full circle there. But yeah, I mean, I still, like these characters. I like the overall adaptation of the books that, from what I've read, I do like seeing something different, not just a simple copy paste from the books. And adapting it to modern times, I think they've done a good job of doing that. And just the performances are great. Really overall good script writing and dialogue and stuff like that. So I'm definitely excited for what's to come. It's just a little bit of a bummer that we have to wait as usual. And then it was also just kind of refreshing to see kind of like this whole season be a whole different tone, a lot of stream of consciousness type of storytelling, more chaotic, and in the rock star theme was of Lestat's on tour was really fun to watch. The vampire bandmates, was fun. The progression of the Armand and Daniel character was interesting too, and this season was I feel like a lot. It seems, I'm trying to remember, really compare it to last season, but it felt a lot crueler, in like to the characters, but in like in a good horror way, So it did feel like it was building up. It built up from the previous seasons, kind of the cruelty builds up more. The Gabriella character, I feel like, was interesting, but again, I feel like her relationship with Lestat, I feel like still needs a little bit more time in the oven there to fully feel more fleshed out. And of course, that's probably just general what we're gonna get moving forward. How with future seasons, how the Armand character now feels a little bit more fully fledged out, compared to maybe last season. But I don't know. I feel like last season was still pretty good. I feel like, I think season 2 is still probably my preferred season. It's kind of hard. Maybe it's a taste thing, just my own personal taste of just enjoying like the romantic aspect of Louis and Armand in Paris in the theater and the vampires. That was really nice. And even Claudia, I think, really was her best last season, of course. So it's like, it's hard to top that personally, but I think this is still good vampire TV, and I do feel like maybe they kind of, there's a little bit, some of the queer elements are a bit lacking this season. There's still, there was that rom-com episode, the previous episode was really good, with Louis and Lestat hanging out, but I feel like, if they didn't have that much, they didn't even kiss that much this season at all. I mean, they're kind of like on their way to get it back together, so it kind of makes sense. But I feel like they were focusing a lot on Lestat and Gabriella, and also him and that groupie girl, I forgot her name already. So I felt like they were trying to cater more towards the straight audience a lot this season. So I just would wish they would have leaned a little bit more toward the queer fans a little more this season than they did. Again, it feels like they were trying to attract new audiences, but as we see with the ratings, like it didn't seem to attract too many new viewers. Maybe once it is on Netflix, maybe more people will see it. Maybe that'll change, but I feel like they need to stick with the core audience that really loves these characters, and also I don't know if they're going to release an uncut version later, which is what they did with the second season. And during the second season, there was like an uncut version that was released on different platforms. I think on Amazon and Apple, maybe. I haven't seen anything about different versions being released right now. I think we only have this one version, and maybe they'll just stick to this one version. But this season did have those cut to blacks, even though they were cut to blacks for commercials. Even though I think they were done a little better this season than last season, that were much more abrupt and disrupted the flow. I think for the most part it was fine here in this season, but it also kind of indicates that perhaps maybe we'll have a fuller uncut version of this season coming up in the next few months, or maybe next year or something, in the lead up to the Queen of the Damned, which I would be interested to watch. But it might be a situation where I'll just wait to rewatch it, the full version, up until leading up to the release of Queen of the Damned, which is kind of what I did this last season too, for season 2, to rewatch it, the full version. But yeah, again, I wish they just did a full version release up front. But we'll see what they do with it. But yeah, overall, it may not be. It's probably not. Doesn't top season 2, but it's still one of my preferred shows. These beautiful vampires. But yeah, let me know what you think. How did you feel about the ending? Was it satisfying? Did you at least get some satisfaction from the Armand reveal, the Lestat dream sequence? Let me know. Some cool effects though, some cool practical effects in this show. Fun stuff. All right, that's gonna be it for now. I'll be here under the moonlight until next season. I'll be doing more videos too before then. All right, I'll see you later. Bye bye.